Welcome back, What a Fuster Cluck fans, and what a Fuster Cluck indeed. As per usual, I had my episode all planned out and ready to go, and typical of the news cycle that we're in today, some insane news has broken this past weekend. And so I thought, let me gather my thoughts and let me do a podcast episode on this. Now, as per usual, it is always my goal to not lean into one side versus the other, but to tell you what I know, to tell you what I've researched, and to give you a little bit from all sides of the political spectrum to hopefully help you to make a more informed decision. But as per usual, always do your own research. Always look into alternative news sources. Do not subscribe to just your CNNs or your Fox News outlets. You guys know how I feel about this. So hopefully you have found yourself some independent podcasts that you can listen to and some independent news outlets as well that will start to sort of shift your perspective a little bit so that you're not living in a silo or living in a bubble of just one political party's message. All right, let's go ahead and kick this off. So what has happened over this weekend? Basically, what's happened is a war has broken out with Iran. And you've got Israel and the United States as allied forces working together to overturn the current Iranian regime. That is what has been going on since basically the middle of the night on Friday, February 28th of 2026. By the end of this episode, people with little to no prior understanding of Middle East geopolitics should grasp the following. What just happened? Why different media outlets report things differently, as they always do. How history has shaped this conflict, what both pro-war and anti-war voices are saying, and why the issue of Iran's nuclear program and Netanyahu's decades-long repeated rhetoric about it matters to what we're going through today. Let's dive into the day of the attack. So again, just this past February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated airstrike across Iran, targeting IRGC strategic sites, with Iran retaliating in multiple directions on different U.S. bases throughout the Middle Eastern region. Based on the reports that we've seen so far, both Israel and the United States did initiate this military action, calling it a preemptive strike against Iran that, again, hit military and nuclear sites in Tehran. Now, I know what you're thinking. I thought we took out their nuclear program back over the summer when it was the 12-day war. So we'll get to that. Bear with me as I work through a lot of information in this episode. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy about the nuclear program in Iran. Was it happening? How far along were they? And if you've been listening to Netanyahu, you know, he's been saying, you know, they're days away, they're months away for literally decades now. And so if we took out the program, what was happening? Well, reports that I've heard come through are that they were trying to reestablish a nuclear program. And we've been trying to negotiate with them repeatedly over and over again to no avail. Now, I know that some of you are aware that there have been statements made by the IRGC, I believe the IRGC and other leaders in Iran, saying that they won't rebuild. But of course, contrary to that, we've got something called our U.S. and our Israeli intelligence. Now, can you trust that? I don't know. But I'm going to caution you guys before I get into the rest of this episode and remind you that when I first heard that this was going on, of course, I completely lost my shit. And I'm like, oh, here we go. This is ridiculous. Trump ran on peace. He's supposed to be the president that doesn't start all of these forever wars, et cetera, et cetera. And I went down the litany of reasons why this was just a horrible idea. What are we doing? Here we go again, just doing Israel's bidding at the behest of the American taxpayer. And then as the weekend kind of progressed, I realized, you know, it's really easy for us to sit back here in our homes, in our comfy spaces in the U.S., and forget that we have what we have today because of the sacrifices of our American servicemen and women and those who joined the Army, the military, the Navy, etc. And I have to believe that somewhere behind some closed doors, something is going on that we are just not going to be aware of, maybe for decades to come, when independent journalists start to go down the rabbit hole of research and figure out what the hell really happened. But for now, I want to try to be fair to both sides. I agree we should not be in this war, but I do not work in a position where I have any insider information. I only know what's been reported. I only know what I'm hearing across all of the outlets that I listen to. And again, I'm not a fan of this war. I don't support this war, but I also, the other side of me just has to believe there is a reason. We don't know what it is. And we can only hope and pray that whatever that reason is legitimate enough for this to be taking place. And I also want to caution people about the forever war methodology, because nothing right now, based on the attacks that have happened, indicates that this will be another forever war costing American taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. Let's just see how this pans out. Now, what happened? So I've already mentioned the U.S. and Israel struck together. And of course, Iran retaliated with drones and missiles across many U.S. military bases in the region. What I'm hearing from Al Jazeera, which is a key reporter in this instance, because they're obviously a local news affiliate in that region, Israel announced its strikes against Iran. U.S. officials confirmed the participation. The strikes occurred early Saturday morning, targeting sites near the Supreme Leader's compound in Tehran, which is the capital. Their justification: Israel termed its actions, again, a preemptive strike, and the U.S. cited indicators of an impending Iranian attack. This is according to many U.S. officials. As far as retaliation goes, again, we know what they've done. Some of those sites are, again, military bases in the region, places in the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait are the ones that I'm aware of today. Now, I want to talk about who was targeted and who's actually been confirmed as dead. Israeli U.S. operations say that they were targeting Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. Again, I thought we obliterated that in June. What's going on? A little mixed messaging here. This is what causes angst to so many in the American public who just want transparency. But I will also say, if I'm a reasonable person, can we really know it all? Or is that giving away our cards to the enemy? Now, that's not me saying I support the war. That's just me trying to have a fair and balanced perspective. We know that substantial, large-scale damage has already been done. Key targets killed. First and foremost, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. I'm probably botching the pronunciation of his name, as well as all the others I'm going to try to say. This is a key target. And the fact that we already have confirmation that he was hit and, in fact, killed, there must be regime change at this point, because he essentially led the regime as the supreme leader of the country. So if he's dead, obviously somebody else has to come and step into his place. Now, who is that going to be is the question we don't have answered yet. I'm not even going to say the names. Okay. Some others that were taken out: the defense minister, the chief of staff of the armed forces, the security advisor to Khamenei, the supreme leader, IRGC commander in chief, IRGC aerospace force commander, IRGC commander, IRGC intelligence chief, intelligence officer for Iran's emergency command, head of the SPND Nuclear Defense and Research Department, and former head of the SPND as well. All of this validated by Al Jazeera, the local news outlet. Let's dive into a little bit of the history of the region. In 1979, there was a revolution in Iran. This was a U.S.-backed Shah overthrow. So again, want to be very clear about that. The United States of America backed the Shah being overthrown, and the Islamic Republic was therefore established. Here we go again, getting involved, sticking our nose in where it probably doesn't belong in the name of geopolitics. This established a long friction in the West, accusations of sponsoring militias, nuclear talks, sanctions, and diplomatic cycles over decades. Why does this matter today? The 1979 Iranian Revolution. It went from being a pro-Western monarchy led by the king at the time, the Shah, to becoming the Islamic Republic ruled by religious clerics, often cited today as the individuals that you will hear chanting "Death to America" or other such terminology. They are very, very strict with their population, having Shiite law across the country, following one religion. They obviously do not have a lot of freedom there. And let me just say, before anybody starts attacking the information that I'm bringing to you, for many years, I worked for a Persian dentist whose family came to the United States of America fleeing religious persecution. I worked with her for many years, met her and several members of her family, and I can tell you that the way she describes her upbringing versus what happened in 79 and forward are two distinctly different worlds. So forgive me, but I really feel like I have firsthand source knowledge. And she was born and raised in Tehran and saw what happened and still has family there to this day. And I can tell you that what she has told me since this war broke out is that the people of Iran that really truly want freedom are literally dancing in the streets today. And so please keep that in mind. Now, does that mean that the U.S. should support this war? That's a whole other conversation. But anyway, going back to the revolution. This single event reshaped the Middle East and is the reason Iran's government operates in the way that it does today. So it's hard not to feel like we're kind of at fault for what happened over there. Now, who was the Shah? Iran was ruled by Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, a monarch backed strongly by the United States and the United Kingdom. Why was he controversial? He modernized Iran rapidly. He was an authoritarian. Wealth inequality skyrocketed. Many religious leaders believed he was destroying Islamic identity, and many Iranians saw him as a Western puppet. In 1953, this is an important historical backdrop. In 1953, the CIA and UK intelligence helped overthrow Iran's elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, after he nationalized oil. That coup restored the Shah's power. That event still fuels Iranian distrust of the United States to this day. Now, by the late 1970s, inflation was high in Iran. Political repression was severe. Religious leaders were mobilizing opposition. Secular liberals and leftists also opposed the Shah, obviously. Protests erupted nationwide in 1978. The key religious figure leading the opposition from exile was a gentleman named Ruhollah Khomeini. He promised to end corruption, end Western domination, restore Islamic public, and provide justice for the poor. In January 1979, the Shah fled Iran, seeing what was coming. And in February 1979, Khomeini returned to massive crowds. By April, Iran officially became the Islamic Republic of Iran. So what really changed? It's not just that they swapped leaders. Essentially, it became a theocracy, meaning religious clerics hold ultimate political authority. So, what are some of the key structural changes? Number one, creation of the position of the supreme leader. The supreme leader is above the president. This is the target that was taken out in this attack. Other changes were brought about Islamic law, as I mentioned, Sharia-based law systems, strict social codes, strong anti-U.S. and anti-Israeli ideology flourished. Later that year, Iranian students seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran, leading to the 444-day hostage crisis. This permanently damaged the U.S. and Iranian relations up until literally today. One group that I want to point out that I've already mentioned the acronym for and that many of you may or may not know who and what they are is the IRGC. The full name is Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They were again established in 1979, immediately following the revolution. They were created after overthrowing the Shah. The new regime did not trust the regular military, of course, because it had ties to the monarchy and had served the previous monarchy. So they needed to make sure that there was a complete overhauling. And so they created a parallel military force to protect the revolution that just happened, to defend Islamic rule, to prevent coups, and to crush internal dissent. Again, this force is what became known as the IRGC. Sounds amazing. Seems like maybe the people really wanted it. But over the decades to come, it caused such oppression for the Iranian people. And again, this isn't about whether this war is right or wrong. This is just getting a little bit of context on what truly is a beautiful country. If you've ever seen pictures of Tehran, it's gorgeous. It has these beautiful mountains. There are ski resorts, lovely cities. I mean, it's really a beautiful country. I think when a lot of people think of the Middle East, I really don't know what they think about, really. But I wonder if they understand that Iran was an actual sort of a culture where if you looked at the people, they looked a lot like people you'd see in the US during the same kind of time period, similar styles, etc. Obviously, women were much less oppressed during that time. And so it's important to know who the IRGC is and what they do. So again, not just a military branch, it's a military force, ground, naval, aerospace, all of it. A political power center, an intelligence network, an economic empire, and the handler of Iran's foreign proxy militias. They report directly to the supreme leader, not to the president. They have a foreign operations arm. The IRGC controls what's called the Quds Force, I believe is how you pronounce it, which handles operations outside of Iran. This is where things get sticky. They support groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, various militias in Iraq, Syrian government forces, and Palestinian militant fractions. This is why the IRGC is central to regional tensions because of who they support and how they support them. The United States obviously designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization in 2019, which is the first time the U.S. labeled part of another country's official military in this manner. So clearly wanting to paint the picture that bad guys, right? Clearly wanting to paint the picture that we should associate the IRGC essentially as a terrorist organization. And that's going to lead to like a little bit of, a sour attitude from the IRGC, right? And so there is no love lost between the US and Iran, none whatsoever. And anybody who's been paying attention for any length of time knows that and can tell you that. Now, it's not just a clash of religions. It goes far beyond that. It's a true deep-seated hatred. The economic power of the IRGC, again, major because they control all sectors of Iran's economy, construction, energy, telecommunications, black market sanction networks. They're deeply embedded in the country's financial structure, which means sanctions often strengthen them rather than weaken them. The easiest way for me to explain this, so imagine if after the American Revolution, instead of just creating a military, the founders created a second, more powerful military that answered only to one religious leader. And that group also ran major parts of the economy and foreign covert operations. That's essentially what the IRGC is in Iran. So you can see how even in a democracy, if you have this type of a structure set up, what good essentially is the president if there's someone above him? And as I say that, I'm kind of thinking through this myself in real time. And this is why we have multiple branches of government to keep our president in check. I know a lot of jokes are going to fly about all the executive orders that Trump signs and how he just does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. But at the end of the day, look what just happened with the tariffs, right? The Supreme Court struck those down. Trump was obviously pissed off about that. And this is why we have multiple branches of government so that we can try to keep our president in check. In Iran, no such thing exists. The IRGC is at the top, and above them is the supreme leader, the Ayatollah. So this is an important structure to keep in mind when you're thinking about the oppression of the people and just the obvious, how do I want to say this? Just the obvious ability for corruption to so easily start to dominate when this is what you have ruling your country. Want to emphasize why this matters today. When Israel or the U.S. targets Iranian military assets, these are often the IRGC facilities. When Iran retaliates regionally, it's often IRGC-linked militias responding to these attacks. When analysts talk about hardliners in Iran, they're often referring to the IRGC influence. And the IRGC is the spine of the revolutionary state. Obviously, the implication here is that with no spine, you're going to basically collapse. So the IRGC is the spine of the whole revolutionary state. And that's an important piece of information to keep in mind. Remember, not all Iranians support the regime. Not all Iranians support the IRGC. As I just said, I know someone personally in my own life, and another one who I don't know personally, but whose podcast I absolutely love is the Patrick Bet David Show. Patrick Bet David was born and raised in Iran, and his family fled after the revolution as well. And he talks about the people he still knows there and what he remembers from when he was growing up and the situation that he was in. And so when I hear actual Iranian people who are now citizens of the United States of America. And he went on to serve in our military, by the way, which thank you for your service. But when I hear actual people from Iran, born and raised, who still have family members there, I don't even necessarily need Al Jazeera if I know that there are people out there communicating with people in Iran today and hearing just how absolutely relieved it just feels like an Independence Day for so many over there that have been oppressed for so long. And so, although these people have been ruled by an iron fist, many of them for decades now have been secretly meeting, risking their lives, trying to spread the word. And here we are with the imminent attack finally having happened. And what does this mean for the Iranian people? Now, I understand that we are not the police of the world, or at least we shouldn't be. But even that is an argument that I can really see both sides of, because, we're not living in the 1300s anymore, the 1400s anymore. This is the 2000s now, right? We have intercontinental ballistic missiles. We have nuclear arsenals in places across the globe. We have transportation that can get us anywhere in a matter of hours that used to take days to get to. So I think sometimes we really have to ask ourselves, while I'm not a proponent of war, and while I hate the idea of it, and while I hate thinking about the thought that one of my children might one day have to be drafted, as has happened in this country before, obviously I get incredibly upset and even devastated to think of the thought. And I don't ever want my children to go and serve in a war that seems to just have no legitimate reason to have to sacrifice your life for. But when it comes to policing the world, when you have radicalized people roaming the earth that literally want you dead, it's really hard to say that nothing should be done. And so I'm really struggling right now to make heads or tails of this and to decide, do I support this? Do I not support this? Am I passionate one way or the other? And today I'm not. Now, as more information comes out, maybe I'll change my mind on that. I'm sure that I will form a more solid opinion. But today I'm just trying to think of all things. I'm thinking of my old boss that I used to work for and how relieved her people are. And I'm trying to put myself in that position where if I was living in an oppressed nation, I would probably pray every day for an America to swoop in and save me. Now, does that make it right? Does that mean I want to pour my tax dollars into the military industrial complex? No. But I do, if I'm being a reasonable person, I have to ask myself that question before I basically poo-poo all over this war. So these are some of the things I'm working out in my head. And I'm wondering what you think of these things as I'm saying them. Have you even thought about that? If you or your family was living in these conditions under that type of rule, would you not pray or beg or just desperately want someone to save you every day? I mean, it's just so much easier said than done. And we all can have our opinion while we're, again, sitting here in the U.S. And as of today, things seem not so grim here compared to all of the stuff that's going on in the Middle East. You still have got the war with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, there's a lot of places in the world that are so highly volatile, and we are really, truly just blessed. So in the midst of all this chaos, just be thankful for the things that you have in your life today that are going well. And really think before you form your opinion on this particular attack and whether it's right or whether it's wrong. Wait for more information to come out. I'm sorry, you guys, but it really is too early for us to make a distinction one way or the other. You guys can talk crap about Trump all day, every day. I could care less. Like, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But before you form a really strong arm position on what is happening today, just think about all the things that I just said. All right, here's the part that really like boils my biscuits is Netanyahu and our relationship with Israel. Obviously, since the release of some of the Epstein files, there is so much controversy between the American public and our support for Israel and the amount of money that we dump into that society and the amount of control that they seem to have over the president and this administration's decisions. Bibi Netanyahu has been talking a nuclear rhetoric game for literally decades, ladies and gentlemen. There are slews of news clips floating around on the internet. You can probably pull them up and find them for yourself, where he has been saying for years that Iran is months away, days away, weeks away from having a full, nuclear bomb. This has been going on since the 1990s. And again, it's not even just that he said it like once. He has been saying it repeatedly. It's like the squeaky wheel gets the oil. In 1995, he said within 3 to 5 years, Iran could build a bomb. In 2009, he told the U.S. congressional audiences Iran was 1 or 2 years away. In 2012, he used a cartoon bomb. He used a cartoon bomb chart at the UN, arguing it was about a year away. In 2025, 2026, latest claims he said Iran could produce a bomb in a very short time, months or weeks. And this would require military action. And so he has just been banging this drum again for decades. And it's just crazy to me that people like Tulsi Gabbard, who are in the administration now, were so anti-war with Iran. And now, like, we're really just not hearing from her. And I think a lot of people who support the Trump administration are really disappointed about that, because it seems like everyone has taken a complete turn, a total 180. And so I can understand why people are upset. But again, it's easy to talk when you're not behind the closed doors, and we really have no idea the bits of information that our government has that we do not have. So, all right, critiques of the Netanyahu claim. Many analysts note these warnings have repeatedly failed to materialize, even as the deadlines continue to shift. Critics compare this pattern to Iraq's weapons of mass destruction claims, which we all know now that was a complete fallacy to be able to encourage and propagandize the American population to support going to war with Iraq, even though they had nothing to do with 9/11 and they did not have weapons of mass destruction. I mean, the whole thing was just basically used because we had been wanting to invade Iraq for many years. And so we built up this argument, this whole weapons of mass destruction claim, and it all ended up being completely false. There are so many books written about this today that you should really consider reading. They're very interesting, very mind-opening. And it's one of the things that really started to make me understand, as someone who lived through 9/11, understand just how easily we can be manipulated by our government, how easily we can be propagandized to just blindly support a war that we really had no business going into. All right, reports from international nuclear watchdogs like the IAEA find no concrete evidence Iran is currently weaponizing, though enriched uranium exists and timelines are debated by experts. I really just want you to understand why perceived imminence of an Iranian bomb became such a central justification in media and political rhetoric, even as the intelligence assessments were varying across the board. As early as last year, in fact, I think that there are statements from Tulsi Gabbard herself saying that they actually weren't very close. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, actually they are. And it's like, what do we believe? Why is the information shifting so much? But this is just the landscape we live in today, right? Where it's like, today this is happening, tomorrow something completely new is happening, and it's ever changing. And just by the time you think you've wrapped your head around what's going on, something new and crazy, spawns up somewhere else. So it's just really hard to try to make sense of it all when the information is constantly changing or just, again, doing a full 180. At this point, again, at this point, I want to kind of take a step back and talk about some of the diverse commentary that we're seeing on this strike from the left, from the right, and from the center. I'm going to break down some notable voices and their angles, and we're going to go all over the place here. We've got some right-leaning people like Tucker Carlson, Patrick Bet-David, and Megyn Kelly, who focus on the threat, the U.S. responsibility, and the intelligence questions. We've got our left-leaning progressives like Crystal Ball, Kyle Kulinski, the Young Turks, for instance, who emphasize anti-war diplomatic solutions and humanitarian consequences. Sorry, we've got our libertarian or contrarian points of view coming from Dave Smith and Daryl Cooper, for instance. They definitely have anti-intervention ideology. They have critiques of state narratives that are important to take into consideration. And then you've got your civics and your journalistic skepticism, people like Michael Tracy and Glenn Greenwald with legal questions and media framing of all of this. So you guys, this is another reason why I do this podcast. I said at the top of the podcast, it's so important to me to try to balance perspectives here and try to give it to you from all angles, right? Because if you're only thinking one way, if you're only listening to one news outlet, if you're only listening to one source, of course, you're going to get brainwashed. There's just no way around it. And in order for you to make an informed decision, you really need to think about what's being said across the board and then form your opinion from that. So I listen to almost everyone who I just listed out here on a regular basis at like warp speed. I cannot listen to a podcast if it's not on like double the speed. Even my own podcast, I can't listen to myself talk. So I have to completely ramp it up when I'm listening to myself. But I listen to all of these people, all the names I just mentioned. I touch on all of their podcasts. I look at Substacks. I look at things like Ground News. I try to like make sense of all of this from across the board so that you don't have to. So what are the right-leaning and conservative commentary people saying? Their general theme is that Iran is a legitimate threat, but the U.S. government must justify its actions clearly. Some of their core arguments are Iran has a long history of hostility towards Israel and the U.S. A nuclear-armed Iran would destabilize the region. If military action was taken, it may have been necessary. However, Americans do deserve transparency about intelligence, and even folks on the right are really pushing back and very much being an anti-war voice, which is very interesting considering historical perspectives from these same groups of people. So skepticism about whether U.S. leaders are acting in American interests or being pulled by alliance obligations from Israel, that's definitely the elephant in the room. And like I said, there's just a lot of internal divide happening even on the right. There's like this hawkish wing who just thinks that the preemptive strikes are going to be totally justified regardless of what you say. And then there's like the populist America First wing, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, who are thinking, why are we involved at all? What is the point of another foreign intervention? Why can't we just worry about American first when we've got inflation that we're still dealing with and all kinds of problems that we need to address at home, our crumbling infrastructure, for instance, AI threatening to take over everybody's white collar job, all these things. And here we are fighting another foreign war. So all of these questions are legitimate, but it's very promising for me to see that even in one party, there's divide going on because it shows me that people actually are not subscribing to how they should think, but rather what makes sense to them, what resonates with them, what does the evidence tell them. So basically the summary on the right is that Iran is dangerous, but if we're going to go to war and prove it's necessary and prove it serves American interests, then we're just going to go ahead and do that. And that's basically what you're going to hear when you're listening to Fox News. So what are the progressives and the people on the left saying? Their general theme is that this feels like another imminent threat narrative that could spiral into an unnecessary forever war. This is a legitimate concern. I can totally agree with that. Some of their core arguments is we've heard months away for a bomb before. Intelligence has been wrong in the past. Again, Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. Civilian casualties are inevitable and unacceptable. War strengthens hardliners inside Iran. Diplomatic channels should have been exhausted. I want to go back to the last two bullets I just read. So war strengthens hardliners inside Iran. What does this mean? At the end of the day, there are people in Iran who do support the IRGC or benefited from the IRGC and supported the supreme leader. And, I'm sure many of you heard, I think there was an all-girls school or a school, maybe it was boys and girls, but I'm pretty sure it was a girls' school that was struck as part of these military operations. And many or all of those children were killed, which is horrible. And we should all not feel good about that. And I know on the war party, the argument is always going to be, well, war is hard and, innocents will lose their lives and it's just part of what it is. But that doesn't mean that as humans, we can't feel absolutely horrible about this, as I believe we should. But then I think about the parents of those girls or the brothers of those girls or the family members of those girls or whoever. And What are they going to think about the United States? What are they going to think about Israel in the next decade, in the next 20 years? And are we not just fueling the next terrorist organization to be anti America when they see their own family members being blown up by our armory? And I'm really just trying to be fair about all of this and think about that. And this is part of the problem when we intervene. So, as I said earlier, I think about those people that are praying for America to come in and save them. And then I think about those people, the innocent lives that are taken as war unfolds, who become the fallout. And what does it do to those people? And how does that make them view America, Americans, American culture, and Israel alike? And I can't help but think these are the reasons why these types of decisions should be thought through so carefully whenever possible, because I don't think there is a perfect solution. And I think that's what I'm realizing more and more. And that's why I want to be careful not to pretend like I have all the answers or that any of us are capable of making these decisions any better than anybody else if we had a magic wand that we could wave. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, in the game of thrones, in the game of war, in the game of geopolitics, things are going to happen that will always be completely out of our control. And I don't know that we'll ever be able to make complete sense of it. So the broader concern of the left is military industrial complex incentives, as I mentioned, which those are always looming. And then the media echoing government framing a little too quickly. Now, the summary of the progressive position is essentially that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and war is rarely the solution. Again, I will say, yes, that makes sense to me. Yes, I want transparency. Yes, I agree that we do not have all of the evidence to support what we just did. But again, I argue the fact that it's probably impossible for us to have all of that information without completely showing our cards to the enemy. And so if it does turn out that this war, this attack was completely justified, if it does turn out to be the case, then I hope we find that out. And I hope it's not just fake media propaganda like the weapons of mass destruction claims. I hope it's true. And again, we might have to wait decades for independent journalists to point that out to us. So we really may never know, or hopefully we'll know sooner rather than later. So while I agree with many progressives that these types of things should require extraordinary evidence, and I just haven't seen that yet, I can also sort of imagine that there's just things I don't know, you don't know, and maybe we'll never know. And sometimes we just have to trust that our government is acting in our best interest, as hysterical as that sounds and as difficult as that is for me to actually say out of my mouth when I am so absolutely disgusted and disappointed in our government for so many reasons. And I am just so thankful for what I learned during COVID and had my eyes opened to question everything. And that brings me to my friends, the libertarians, my anti-interventionist friends. And I really resonate with this party more so than ever before, because I just feel like it's one of the only parties that takes us back to the founding fathers' principles for our nation. So what is their general theme? War should only happen if Congress declares it, and only if the U.S. itself is directly attacked. Seems to make sense, right? Seems to support what our Constitution wants for us. I'm going to touch on the Congress approval in just a minute, in just a few minutes, so I will get to that. But this is their general theme. And obviously, to me, this makes the most sense. Like, hey, if Congress didn't agree to this war, we can't have one guy or one woman one day sitting in that position to just say, that's it, we're going to war. Okay, what's the point of Congress? I know that's a question a lot of you are asking. And only if the U.S. is directly attacked. Here's where I'm going to push back on that ideology is, again, we are in a global game here, ladies and gentlemen. We do not do everything we need to do within the borders of our country. We literally rely on foreign entities to provide things like our prescription medications. COVID was not that long ago where we came to find really quick the impacts to the supply chain when there's a global pandemic. And we came to find out really quick just how much we relied on foreign countries for so many things, like our semiconductor chips that come from Taiwan that are so imperative to all of our like technical infrastructure in the year 2026. And so I would really challenge you to think that just because there was not an attack on US soil does not mean that there are things going on geopolitically that don't impact everyday Americans in their lives. And again, I'm waiting for those things to be revealed. I really am, because I actually am concerned that this war is going to impact us negatively. It will impact our economy negatively, because they're shutting down is it the Straits of let me look it up. Okay. There's concerns that they're going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I've heard that they've already shut this down. This is going to be massive. This is going to be massive, because this is a shipping. This is a shipping line that, if impacted, which it sounds like it already has been impacted, could drive up the price of oil, for instance, which I don't care what anybody says. I know we're drilling our own, but that does not mean we're still not relying on the oil market and how that impacts us here at home. And so there is a lot to be said about what Iran still has the ability to do that will impact Americans' lives. And will it all have been worth it? What is the justification? What does America stand to gain from this? I'm still not clear on what that is. So some of the core arguments from the libertarians are constitutional authority matters. I agree, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. Foreign entanglements drain resources and waste lives. Well, I will say, waste lives, that's a tough one, because if there's legitimate reasons for this war, you have to remember that right now we don't have a draft. So people who enlist in our armed forces, they enlist because they want to most of the time, or because they're lost in life, or maybe they just want to travel the world. There's a whole myriad of reasons why people enlist to fight on behalf of this country. And so I would caution us every time we say that it's a life wasted or a life sacrificed for nothing. I really hope that's not going to be the case in this particular instance, but it is a fair point and one worth considering. Their other arguments are preemptive war doctrine is dangerous, and that is the doctrine that both the U.S. and Israel are using this go round, and that blowback is real and long term. We've seen it time and time again. September 11th is a direct result of the exact blowback that libertarians are arguing. Some strategic skepticism coming from this group is escalation math is totally unpredictable. Second and third order consequences are often ignored. Again, this is a healthy skepticism to have, but I would seriously caution us to kind of subscribe to that too soon, because do you honestly think that we don't have people at very high levels in government or even private consultants who are coming up with what's your plan A, what's your plan B, what's your plan C, what's your plan D? Honestly, I cannot imagine that that's the case. I cannot imagine that that's the case. And I cannot imagine we would be where we are today if that were in fact the case, and we weren't thinking 5 steps ahead, and we weren't thinking about all the potential plans and opportunities before we do something like this. That just seems obvious to me. So I would really kind of find that a little bit comical that actually we're not thinking about second and third order consequences, especially because when you know better, you do better. And I think we've been here time and time again, and a lot of us are pissed off and we feel like our government still hasn't learned its lesson, but we don't know that in this instance yet. And unfortunately, only time will tell. And we are so impatient. You know, we want information like this. We want it right now. We don't want to wait for it, but only time will tell, unfortunately. And so all we can do is just wait and see. So what is the summary of the libertarian position? If it's not a direct attack on U.S. and Congress didn't approve it, we shouldn't be involved. What do independent civil liberties and media skeptics, again, like the Glenn Greenwalds, have to say? So their general theme is slow down, verify, and always question the framing. Their core arguments is what intelligence supports imminent threat. Basically, what that means is who's actually saying that Iran is an imminent threat. And when it's coming from Israel, it's just a tough pill for Americans to swallow because we really, truly do believe that we are at the behest of this nation and we're just not clear on why. Now, I understand it's important for us to have an ally in the Middle East, but there's something so much bigger here. And I'm going to get to some tinfoil conspiracies in just a minute, so bear with me. I'm going to get there. I'm sure you're all waiting for that. Or as you're listening to me talk on this episode, you're probably like, oh my God, she hasn't brought up Epstein. Like, what's going on? I think I did bring up Epstein actually, but now I'm going to get into that a little bit more. So, the media skeptics also say, well, who authorized this legally? So this goes back to the libertarian piece when I said I was going to address this. Guys, I don't know if you know this, but the last full-scale declared war the U.S. participated in that was approved by Congress was World War II. Let that sink in. We've obviously had several wars and conflicts since. Here is the reality. For anyone out there saying Congress didn't approve this war, well, guess what? They haven't approved the war seemingly since World War II. So what does that tell you? This isn't just a Trump thing. So please get that out of your mind. Unfortunately, the opportunity of war for the military-industrial complex often doesn't present itself with a long period of time to sit and think. It's more times than not fast and furious. It's more times than not putting leaders in positions to have to think rapidly and make decisions quickly. This is why we hopefully try to plan these things out. This is why in geopolitics, we hopefully try to sit down and figure out who's doing what, where, how does this impact us? What are we going to do if this happens? These are all the scenarios that we could possibly face. And here's how we're going to handle this one, this one, this one. And this is our backup plans for this one, this one, this one. And we're like ready to go so that when we do have to make a decision, we can make it clearly, collectively, concisely, based on information that we know and some plans that we've already put together. I don't know how it works. Obviously, I could be completely talking out of my beep, but like seriously, I don't know how it works. I can only assume how it works. And I really hope that's how it works. And I hope it works even better than the way I imagine it to work. But because we don't always have the luxury of time and stopping to wait for Congress, because of this, we have what is known as the War Powers Resolution. What is the War Powers Resolution? It requires the executive branch to justify its action before Congress within 60 days of military action beginning. Now, the hope here with Iran is that this won't last 60 days, hopefully. But guys and girls, this is how wars are started all the time without congressional approval because they lean on the War Powers Resolution, which again requires the executive branch to go and justify its actions before Congress within 60 days of military action beginning. So if you're hearing anywhere that what Trump is doing is not legal or he's bypassing Congress, trust and believe that at some point in the next 60 days, because of the War Powers Resolution Act, he will have to go and justify before Congress. We've seen this happen time and time again throughout history since World War II. So please look into that. Some of their other core arguments are journalists asking the hard-hitting questions, or they're basically just pumping out the propaganda that the Trump administration wants you to hear, or that CNN or NPR or MSNBC wants you to hear, and that war narratives harden quickly and suppress dissent. Their central concern is information manipulation in wartime. Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. This is why Lolita is always going to tell you to do your own research, to expand your horizon on what you're listening to, and to consider what all sides are saying. If you are only listening to one side, I promise you, you have already been manipulated. You have got to look across political spectrums, look into different reporters, different independent news outlets, and then formulate what you really believe at that point. See where the argument really is the strongest. Who's really making the strongest argument and what resonates most with you before you make your decision. So the summary of what skeptical journalists are basically pointing out is that the most dangerous moment in a democracy is when war claims go unquestioned. I couldn't agree with that more. Thank God we live in a country where we can actually question what our government is doing. Do you think that the people of Iran since 1979 have had that same luxury? No. Does that mean we should be going to war on behalf of freeing those people, which is hopefully what will happen here? Again, it's too soon to tell, so I don't want to throw stones at glass houses. Certainly that's what we hope for, but I really just cannot stress enough how we have to think about the fact that we do have the freedom to question when we go to war. And we do have the freedom to speak out about that without being literally murdered. I am hearing claims that the Supreme Leader and the IRGC have literally murdered over 30,000 Iranian people for going against what the regime preaches. Over 30,000 people, many of them in the recent protests that have been breaking out across the country. 30,000 people. The crimes against humanity that the Iranian regime, that the IRGC has inflicted on the Iranian people since the 80s is unfathomable and unspeakable in the United States culture. So if you don't have anyone in your life who was born and raised in Iran or who has family or friends in Iran, I highly suggest you try to search out those people online, because there is no lies when you really know the truth. And when you're hearing directly from citizens who live it every day, who have seen it, witnessed it, confirmed it, it's really hard to argue with what's been going on in that region. And again, I just think about my own boss. She's not an old lady, but I call her my old boss because obviously I worked for her a long time ago, not too long ago, but long enough that I can't help but be happy for her in this moment, because I can see in our conversations the relief that she is feeling and the promise of freedom, because she wants to go back and be able to visit people. And I don't think she's even been able to do that often. And her husband's family is a whole other subset who, again, fled religious persecution. And her husband, I can't remember the name of the religion he practices, but it's such a beautiful religion on its face. And it's like they had to leave their country. And now think of all the people, if things do work out, and I pray that they do, who will be able to travel back to Iran and experience that country in the way that it really should be experienced and the beauty that's truly there. So as much as I'm against another foreign war, as much as I'm against my hard-earned taxpayer dollars and yours going towards another foreign war, again, it's early. Let's wait and see what happens. It's all we can do. There's nothing you can do about this. There's nothing I can do about this. We can only talk about it and have educated conversations and try to hope and pray for the best, which I know sounds like, sure, let's just hope and pray for everything. But you know what, guys? Sometimes that's really what it boils down to. That's all it boils down to, because it's all we can do. None of us are fighting over there. None of us live over there. None of us really know what's going on behind these closed doors. So it's really easy for us to all talk and run our mouths, but we just don't know. So my big takeaways across the political spectrum, there are three main fault lines. Number one, is Iran truly an imminent nuclear threat? Warhawks say yes. Critics say that timeline has been overstated for decades. In my mind, I have no doubt based on what I have seen, reports that come out of Al Jazeera, what we've seen the Supreme Leader say on camera, I have no doubt that they have a deep hatred for Western civilization. And so, yes, that does concern me. 100% that concerns me. Number two, does military action make the U.S. safer? Supporters argue deference. Opponents argue escalation and blowback. We've really got to just think about both of these. These are both really good arguments. Both should be weighed evenly and sufficiently, and they both make sense no matter how you look at it. I don't know in this instance that one is more correct than the other. And number three, who decides and based on what evidence? Constitutionalists demand congressional approval. Remember what I told you about that act, that essentially in 60 days, that approval does need to happen. And so this will all unfold in due time. And we will see if there was a legitimate reason, if Congress would have actually gone ahead and approved it, if they had all the information that couldn't be quickly and easily provided to them to make an informed decision. So that will play out. We have to allow that to play out. I know I'll be tuning in for that. Journalists demand transparency, as they should. What are we without our independent journalists? These are the people who break the stories that help people like you and people like me understand what's really going on out there and understand that we really do need to question everything. And lastly, populists question foreign influence. Again, legitimate, very legitimate. What's fascinating is that across left, right, and libertarian voices, there's actually one point of agreement. Nobody wants another forever war. Not me, and hopefully not you. I can only hope that we are doing exactly what we need to do to be strategic, to get in, and to get out. The disagreement is over whether this prevents one or starts one. And as I said, only time will tell. It's obviously still very early. So let's all, again, just hope and pray that this does not turn into another forever war, which would really look bad on the Trump administration, since this is exactly what they preach against, what Trump has been preaching against forever. I've seen people call him a traitor online. I've seen people call for his impeachment. You know, this is a lot of hot heads going on out here, and just something that we really need to think about. And I will leave you with this other piece of information for anyone else who's wondering. You want to look at who is Iran strategically aligned with geopolitically. Russia, China, and the Middle East. These countries these countries and regions are not exactly best friends with America. Iran's ties with Russia and China shape global power interests. Rival powers do not want direct U.S.-Israeli dominance, which would affect alliances, arms, and diplomacy. And China is economically tied to Iran. Russia is politically aligned with Western actions. And so this isn't just Middle Eastern politics, you guys. It's global geostrategy. Now, I'm going to leave it there. I think I've said enough for today. Hopefully, I've taught you a little bit of something that you didn't know before. If I misstated anything, please feel free to reach out and fact check me, and I will submit a correction just as soon as possible. You know, I'm not a Middle Eastern expert. I only know what I know from what I've read, what I hear on the podcast that I listen to, from the multitude of different news sources and outlets that I listen to. So again, if I've said something wrong, email me whatafusterclucklk@gmail.com, and I will be happy to correct that. If you just want to provide me some more information or your point of view on this, send me an email. I love to hear from you guys. So please keep those communications coming. What a Fuster Cluck, available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Everyone, please follow. Hit that follow button. It's so important. So much of the data that I'm looking at, a lot of the statistics on my show, the streams, the people who are listening, they haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, or they haven't clicked that follow button yet. And that's really what's going to help me in the algorithm to get this information out to the masses more than my my current centered listeners who I have, my repeat listeners who I absolutely love and appreciate. But please, I don't make the algorithm, so I'm sorry to have to give you just one more step to do. I love that you're listening to the show. Absolutely love that you're sharing the show. But unfortunately, the algorithm is against me if you don't click that subscribe button and if you don't click that follow button if you're on Apple or Spotify. So you've got to subscribe, you've got to follow so that What a Fuster Cluck pops up for you and it can start to raise me up in the algorithm so I can keep getting this information to more people. And my goal in the second half of 2026 is to start to get back to interviews with other people, or just conversations, I should call them, because I'm not really a journalist. So I don't want to say I'm conducting all these interviews. I'm just a curious person who likes to explore all kinds of different things and learn just a ton of different information. I've been doing a lot of solo episodes, so I appreciate you listening to those. I'm really just trying to find my own voice here and figure out what works best for me. But I do want to get back to getting some other minds on the show with me, because I think that that's a really healthy thing to do. So whatafusterclucklk@gmail.com. Follow, subscribe, share, and send me your feedback. I cannot wait to do another episode next week. Until then, everyone, just try to calm down. Let's see how this is all going to pan out. If you are a spiritual person, say your prayers. Try to be as positive as you can. If you're not a spiritual person, I don't know what to tell you, but hopefully you can find some way to make sense of all of this that doesn't drive you absolutely crazy. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of What a Fuster Cluck. What a Fuster Cluck indeed. Until next time, thanks everyone.